It's back to the beach for OU and OSU as bowl season gets underway in December and January. I'm Mike Sherman, and this is the Bedlam Nation Conversation. With me today, OSU beat writer Scott Wright and columnist Jenny Carlson, standing in for our man Jake Trotter, who's on his way to Orlando for the College Football Awards ceremonies. Guys, let's talk about the bowl season. Now we know where everybody's going. Oklahoma in the BCS championship game against Florida. OSU back to the Holiday Bowl, where in 1988 they had their most glorious bowl season ever. Barry Sanders, Heisman Trophy winner, an offensive explosion against Oregon. What's your first impressions of these matchups? Start with you, Scott.
Well, I think the really interesting thing about Oklahoma State and Oregon is if you just go through the NCAA statistics, they're right next to each other a lot. Rushing, they're both in the top 10. Total offense, both in the top 10. Scoring, they're both in the top 10, right? But they're separated by 0.3 points per game. It's really phenomenal. Defensively, it's really similar too. So it's a really even matchup. I think this will be, if you look at it from a statistical point of view, this will be a test of just how good the Big 12 and Pac-10 schedules are, maybe.
And you could almost say the same thing about the OU Florida. I mean, as far as offensive explosions, unique offenses. Are there two more unique than these two?
Yeah, this is a pretty good matchup of offenses, and obviously some of the Florida players doing some talking about Big 12 defenses, and maybe nothing really scandalous, but yet there's been sort of those nods out there that say, hey, I wish I'd have been playing in the Big 12 all year and playing against those defenses. I don't think the Big 12 defenses are as bad as some of those numbers suggest. The Big 12 offenses have been so crazy, really. I mean, I don't know if there's any other way to put it. Florida is really the only one in the SEC that does anything approaching what Oklahoma, Texas Tech, Texas, Missouri, Oklahoma State. There's so many schools that are just slinging it around and not really caring about time of possession or huddling or anything like that. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this Oklahoma defense does against Florida and how Florida's defense does against Oklahoma, because they're not going to have seen anything really like this in the SEC. And defending that's going to be really a challenge for them.
In breaking down, let's start with OSU and Oregon. Scott, talk about how much the 1988 Holiday Bowl still is something cherished and important for Oklahoma State.
Well, it's a big part of that is because of Barry Sanders. Everything that guy did that year in '88 is at the top of the pedestal in Oklahoma State history. You walk through the Heritage Hall area there where they've got all their trophies, and there's a blown up picture of a Sports Illustrated cover that Barry Sanders was on. There's the Heisman Trophy. Everywhere you look, there's something about Barry Sanders, and the football program is really tied to that in a positive way, and obviously the performance he had in the Holiday Bowl was big. 222 yards and 5 touchdowns against Wyoming that year. A lot of people forget that Mike Gundy actually threw for over 300 yards and a couple of scores with Hartley Dykes playing in his final game. So both of those guys, Sanders and Gundy, are in the Holiday Bowl Hall of Fame. Gundy becomes the first person to be a player and a head coach in the Holiday Bowl.
And the other interesting thing about that game is people forget that other than the Bedlam game, there was no other national audience for this unbelievably explosive team, which basically you can stack right alongside the Texas Techs of today, the OUs of today, the Floridas of today. So this was a national coming out party for Barry Sanders too, wasn't it?
Well, and he had the Heisman already in his hands, which at that point, he wins and they're overseas. So people, I think at that point, it sort of put him even on a more elevated stage, if that was possible, Scott. And so I really felt like that in and of itself, here's the Heisman Trophy winner, and they're on national television, which they weren't much that year at all. Yeah, that was a huge deal for Oklahoma State fans, and I think obviously that '88 season was a celebrated year, and then to culminate at the Holiday Bowl, that's a special, special bowl for OSU.
Something else that came out of that, you might remember that Keith Jackson, who had a much bigger voice on the college football scene in 1988, now he's doing Gatorade commercials. But in those days, he was the ABC voice, and he was saying, it's either Troy Aikman or Rodney Peete, and this guy, Barry Sanders, doesn't deserve it. And so this was Barry Sanders and Oklahoma State's answer to that. The Bedlam game wasn't a persuasive enough answer to that because OU won that game. Didn't they play Tech overseas?
In Tokyo.
In Tokyo. So then that wasn't but now all of a sudden in a bowl game on the West Coast, and just an explosion, which really in some ways, Scott, made the Holiday Bowl the defense takes a Holiday Bowl.
Yeah, you go back and look through the history of this bowl game, and they're not afraid to take a really good offense that might not play a whole lot of defense. I'm not saying that about these two teams. These two teams try to play some defense, but they both got really good offenses, and so it's right back into the trend for the Holiday Bowl of big time scoring. There's always some crazy things that happen in the Holiday Bowl, and this game doesn't look any different.
You're watching the Bedlam Nation Conversation, sponsored by Dodge. Let's take a break. On the other side, we'll talk about OSU's bowl opponent. We're back on the Bedlam Nation Conversation, sponsored by Dodge. I'm Mike Sherman, Sports Day of the Oklahoman. With me, OSU beat writer Scott Wright, columnist Jenny Carlson. Guys, we're talking about the Holiday Bowl matchup between OSU and Oregon, December 30th in San Diego. And what also makes this interesting matchup more interesting is the color clash. Has there ever been a college football game where they had to put a little something on the screen that said, do not adjust the color on your set. What you see is what is real, this orange and green. Jenny, I'll let you be our color coordinator for a minute. Anything like it?
Well, aren't they going to have to say, we haven't gone to digital TV just yet. This is what's supposed to be on your screen. There are so many combinations Oregon could go with in this game that what they go with will really dictate how oddball that looks. If they go with that, road sign yellow that they have, that's just going to be almost hard to watch. You're going to have to be really putting some sunglasses. I don't know. It's just going to be difficult to watch. But I hope OSU goes all orange, and I really hope Oregon goes with a stronger green. I think the green, not the neon, but sort of that more traditional Oregon duck green, if that's possible. I'd like to see those two colors on the field together.
Scott, don't you think that OSU ought to get some sort of heads up from Oregon before the game? Producers, anybody who's going to try to broadcast this game on ESPN, hey, give us a heads up so we can do some adjustments here. Maybe paint the field differently.
Oh, so you want them to go play in Boise, play on the blue turf?
Nice.
Well,
that would be even
better.
That would be even better. No, I think Oklahoma State, they probably should be able to find out, just because it could be a pretty traumatic experience walking out there and they've got on white helmets and yellow jerseys and green pants and you don't know what. So Oklahoma State, obviously as the technically the road team, will have the white jerseys on. So
no orange.
Hopefully they'll have the orange pants on. They did that on the road, except for all but one game this year. So most likely I would expect to see the orange pants with the white jerseys. So that's still they'll be able to contribute plenty to the color clash.
One more question about sartorial splendor, and that's the ducks and those things they wear on the shoulders. It look like some sort of truck pattern. What is that? Does anybody know? It looks like they've been run over, or a truck toolbox or something like that.
Yeah, my dad used to have a toolbox with that pattern on it too. So I'm not sure it's.
We're going to work.
Sure what it is.
The Ducks at work. Okay, speaking of the Ducks, though, this is one more way for the folks in Oregon to crawl inside the Oklahoma sports psyche. The last time an Oklahoma team clashed with Oregon, onside kicks. The great Gordon Reese was getting bad phone calls from Oklahoma. He wasn't getting the replay angles. We remember OU at Oregon and what that did to the Sooners season. Is this another way to stir up bad blood between our regions of the country?
I definitely think so. Aside from everything that happened when OU played at Oregon, that Holiday Bowl in 2005 was a pretty crazy game. Obviously, Dennis Dixon and Brady Leaf trying to take over when Kellen Clemens had gotten hurt. Had the late interception, and then Brett Bomar goes crazy there and almost
throws the game away.
Almost throws the game away, and it was just it was a crazy game too. But yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of bad blood between the two states as far as college football goes. So I don't expect this to be any different.
And that part of the country, the Pacific Northwest in Oklahoma, now have a really strong connection too with an NBA team that's now in Oklahoma, and so yeah, I don't know what it is about Oklahoma and the Pacific Northwest, but there's some sort of weird undercurrent between the two.
There's some fence mending to be done. They won't let you pump your own gas up in Oregon. I mean, they're afraid you're going to spill something. Us, pump wherever you want. It's fine. Just slow down your car when you're filling it up. But as far as this matchup, too, is this one more matchup that sort of gives Oklahoma State, though, Here's Oklahoma State. Last year we were writing about exposure. They can't get on television. Now, they've been through this gauntlet of November. They played big 7 o'clock ABC games against Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas, Texas Tech. I'm sorry, not Texas, but Tech. And now here comes one big. This is a big-time matchup on television to end a season of those for OSU. The exposure matters.
Yeah, it's huge. They finished the season with 5 straight games on ABC. A lot of those were primetime night games. Others were 2:30, which in the not too recent history of college football, that was prime time. 2:30 was the big game. So I mean, it's a big deal for these guys. They were on, earlier this season. They were on Fox College Sports, which goes to about 10 million homes in the entire country. This is a really big deal for this program. They've been able to take the persona of Oklahoma State football, which was Boone Pickens and Mike Gundy's rant, and put that all behind them. And now they're known for what they're doing on the field, and it's a lot more positive tone for Oklahoma State football.
Give us an update on the running back injury to Kendall Hunter. How's he going to be in the bowl season?
I don't see any issues with him. I think he'll be fine. That knee, it didn't seem to slow him down in Bedlam. I don't think that it'll be a problem with plenty of time to heal. He's not going through any practices right now. They're just taking it easy with him to rest him up and get him ready for the bowl game.
Are there any other injuries that OSU really wants to use this time off to let heal?
Well, Artrell Woods has a wrist or hand injury of some kind. He's wearing a cast. Not real clear exactly what that injury is just yet. We'll see how soon he's able to get back. Maybe he's able to come back and contribute again. It's been really a rough season for him. We thought that this was going to be kind of a breakout year for him coming back off of the back injury, and then he had a knee injury early and never really got back on track, and now this. And so you'd like to see him get back on the field and be able to contribute.
Okay. Scott, thanks. Listen, you're watching the Bedlam Nation conversation sponsored by Dodge. We'll be back on the other side to talk about the other Back to the Beach matchup, OU versus Florida. We're back on the Bedlam Nation conversation, sponsored by Dodge. I'm sports editor Mike Sherman, here with OSU beat writer Scott Wright and columnist Jenny Carlson. And now we're talking about the BCS title game. Oklahoma, Florida, the matchup that really late in the season, it seems like for once, it's the two teams that are hottest at the end of the year. You know, both of them have one loss. Both of them have little nicks. You lose at home to Ole Miss. It's kind of tough to overcome a little bit, but Florida did it. You lose head-to-head with Texas. That may be tough to overcome, but OU did it. Jenny, as you look at these two teams, what's the more unique offense of the two?
Yeah, that's a great question. Urban Meyer, obviously well known as an offensive innovator, took his offense from up in MAC country out to Utah, spent a couple years there, went crazy, went to the BCS, first time a non-BCS school has ever done that, and then he gets hired at Florida after they fire Ron Zook, and really has probably been one of the more innovative offenses in the SEC. I mean, for a long time, SEC ball was pretty much one style. You didn't see a whole lot of deviation. They've really changed some things there. Tim Tebow makes it go. But, you know, I don't know if you can say which one's more innovative. You've seen some crazy things with Oklahoma. Florida does the same thing. Tebow adds a whole other dimension with his running game and just the way he plays as sort of a fullback as quarterback sort of thing almost. So I don't know what's more innovative, but I think for these two defenses, it's going to be really interesting to see how do they do against the other, because Oklahoma's defense won't have seen anything like an offense with Tim Tebow. On the flip side, Florida's not ever going to see any offense like they're going to see with Sam Bradford on the field and all the weapons he has. It's really going to be interesting to see who comes out better in that matchup.
Scott, don't you wonder a little bit whether Florida Gators fans who were there when Spurrier don't look on the other side at OU and say, hey, this is fun and gun in Crimson. I mean, the way they're spreading the ball, the way they're playing fast, it really in some ways does remind you of some of Spurrier's crazy 60-point-a-game explosions, but even that Gator team wasn't that explosive.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that there's kind of a little bit of a tie that takes you back to that 96 Florida team a little bit. I think when you talk about innovation in these two, I think Florida is the more innovative of these two, because I think Oklahoma's is more based on talent. I think that the pace that they're playing at is fast, but the thing is, we haven't seen a team with this many weapons and this much talent and this much ability play at that speed. We've seen other teams do it. Oklahoma State's pace of play, Missouri's pace of play is right there with what these guys do, but we haven't seen a team with this many weapons come in and do it the way that Oklahoma is doing. So I think that because of that, I think that the way that Florida does things is the more innovative of the two, but still, it's a lot of talent on both sides of the ball.
Stopping the run, and especially a power running game from the shotgun, is not something you usually have to do when you face shotgun teams. Yet Tim Tebow, the double tight ends that look like really upbacks on a punt team, and all the little shuttle passes he does, I mean, that is something that's going to really test the Gerald McCoys, the DeMarcus Grangers, the whoever's playing, Travis Lewis's of OU's defense, don't you think?
Yeah, I've always said that if you've got an offense, even if you do one thing really, really well, whether that's run the ball or pass the ball, Oklahoma has a way to stop you. I mean, we saw that against Tech. Obviously, they pass the ball about as well as anybody. But without a really good running game, Oklahoma knows what to do with a team like that. Where you've got Florida with those multiple options, it's going to test this Oklahoma defense. I think Oklahoma's defense now is better than the last time they played right at the end of the game against a team like this, which I would think Texas, weaponry-wise, with running backs that can run, a quarterback that can run, a good passing game. Obviously, it's kind of a little bit step down when you talk about talent and all the different things that Florida has, but when they had all their weapons on the field before Ryan Reynolds gets hurt and really throws that Oklahoma defense into disarray, they were handling Texas okay. They weren't necessarily stopping them, but they weren't sort of getting run over. Reynolds goes out, that changes the rest of the dynamics of that game. So it'll be interesting to see, he's not going to be on the field. Neither is Austin Box probably. I mean, I guess we don't know until a little bit closer, but with a thinned out linebacker core, how will they do against this Florida defense? Because this Florida offense, because this offense is, it's a lot like Texas in the fact that it's got that run-pass ability in it.
And the quarterback running always just adds a whole nother element into the thing. It's very tough to defend. Let's steer the Heisman Trophy storyline into this. You have Tebow, you have Bradford. It's possible that neither of them will have won this year's Heisman. It's also possible that somebody has won two. Also possible the third is Heisman against Heisman. Folks, what does this do to the matchup? And do you wish we could wait till after this was all over to vote for the Heisman?
Well, I've already voted, so I guess I.
Who'd you vote for, by the way?
I voted for Sam Bradford. The way he ended the season was phenomenal. So there was no other option. I really thought, but. What this does to the matchup, I think, is it's got to make Oklahoma a little bit worried, because the last time they were in this position with Heisman winner against Heisman winner, it didn't work out all that well. So they've got to worry about that. The one thing, though, that I think is interesting about this connection is that you don't hear anybody talking this year about how a sophomore can't win the Heisman, because Tim Tebow did it last year. So I think that Tebow, in a way, might actually help Sam Bradford's chances at winning the Heisman.
He's crashed down that barrier one year right for Sam Bradford. Jenny, how about the Heisman? And who did you vote for?
I also voted for Sam Bradford. And I think it had in part to do with what Scott mentioned, the way he ended the year. After they lost to Texas, they've played 7 games since then. He's thrown 1 interception in those 7 games. That's an amazing stat. And they've played some big, important games since then. So that was impressive. But to me, the thing that made Sam Bradford stand apart from Tim Tebow and Colt McCoy, who are the other 2 players on my ballot, and these were splitting hairs. I think every voter I've talked to, all the voters on our staff, around the country, whoever you're talking to, this was the slimmest of things that you found to differentiate these candidates. The thing, though, that in my mind made Sam Bradford my top pick was that he did not have a bad game. He didn't even have a bad half. If you look at what Colt McCoy and Tim Tebow did, both of them had at least a half during the course of their season that you could point at and say, if they don't have a bad half, their team doesn't lose. If Tebow's better in the second half against Ole Miss, they probably win. If McCoy's better in the first half at Tech, they may win. So Bradford, even though they lost to Texas, he has 5 touchdowns in that game. I don't think you put the Texas loss on a bad day for Sam Bradford. So I looked at his whole body of work and said, you know what? This guy has not had a bad day, and that's pretty impressive. So I went with Bradford, and I think it's going to be a heck of a close vote. If any of those 3 have their name called, Tebow, McCoy, Bradford on Saturday, won't be shocked. Won't be shocked in the least.
And there probably won't be much outrage, will there?
I can't imagine so. I wouldn't be outraged if any of them won.
No, I don't think so, and I don't see anybody besides those 3 finishing in the top 3 either at this point.
Thanks, guys. Listen, that's all for the Bedlam Nation conversation, sponsored by Dodge. To continue the conversation, please go to bedlamnation.com, where OU and OU fans can have at it. Each has their own site. They can speak to each other, message boards, news feeds, all kinds of stuff to keep this conversation going about all things Bedlam. And follow the best coverage team anywhere, every day on newsok.com and in the new look Oklahoman.